Welcome back to another episode of the Client Builder Playbook. I'm Brian Quaranta, and of course, I'm here with the master, Larry Lewis. And our goal here is to help you sell more and make more money and quit doing free consulting. And today, I want to talk about storytelling
Okay.
because I think it's a very important part of the process. And I really didn't understand the power of storytelling until I talked it over with you. And I
Mhm.
remember my exact words. I said, well, what if I don't have a story? And you said, well, do you know of a story you can borrow?
Yeah, I mean, I think of how we develop as children.
Yeah,
What's the first thing that our parents do to us when we're little kids? They
yeah,
tell us bedtime stories,
yeah.
right? So it's part of our zeitgeist. It's part of the way the human mind thinks, is that we think in terms of stories. Now,
Hmm.
just look at where we spend a lot of our time. We watch TV shows, we see movies. Of course, they're all being streamed nowadays. But again, they're stories. And I think the thing that's important is that in order for a story to be effective, what we have to do is we have to tell a story that the person you're telling the story to can relate to
Yeah.
as one of the characters. And so we talk a lot in the training program about what we call third party stories.
Hmm.
Now, a third party story is where you're telling the story of another client,
Hmm.
but that client looks, sounds, and acts an awful lot like the two in front of you.
Got it.
So that when you're telling the story about a specific problem or challenge that
Hmm.
that client had, that person in your conference room, that prospective
Yeah.
client, is saying, wow, that sounds like a lot like us.
Yeah.
And now it resonates with them. And so now, but I think what's interesting is the story and the moral of the story,
Yeah.
or the lesson
Right.
of the story, it sinks in because they identify with it. It sounds a lot like them. And
Do you think you could answer objections with a story?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Let's say somebody said, well, I'm really not big on utilizing annuities. My mom had one, and it was horrible. She couldn't get her money out. Would would that be a good time to even use a story?
well, interesting that you asked that. So let's think about one of our tactics.
Yeah.
We use the tactic that I call Socratic questioning. And what we're trying to do when we get a question is we're trying to avoid the temptation of mind reading. We'll hear a question, and let's take a question that you guys frequently get. Um, I thought annuities are bad.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's even more generic than that. It's, do you sell annuities? Now, if somebody were to say to you, do you sell annuities? What immediately pops into your head?
Hmm. That's a great question. Why do you ask?
Well, that's the right
Yeah.
tactic.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
well, if they sell annuities, I think they're going to immediately judge me, or
Yes.
it's like they don't like them, or they're not going to take me serious as an advisor. All this head trash.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you know, I have a close friend and a guy that has used my training program for over a decade now, that I talk with on a regular basis. He refers to it as don't bring the objection with you.
Mm.
And so what happens is when we hear a question, we automatically assume worst case scenario.
We do.
It's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So you've got
Right.
the Ken Fishers of the world out there, saying their whole marketing their whole marketing shtick is, we think annuities are bad, and so should you,
By the
right?
way, phenomenal marketing shtick, right? I
Great
mean,
marketing
yeah.
shtick.
I mean, all fear based.
eh,
Yeah,
Not legitimate.
not legitimate,
I
right?
mean, and he may be talking about one segment of the annuity market. You
Yeah,
may be
they
talking
take the
about,
worst annuity ever sold in the marketplace, and they use that as the example.
yeah,
Yeah,
and typically that's a
right,
variable annuity, which it's the guys like Ken Fisher that sell them.
right. Yeah,
Those of you that you don't sell those types of
right.
annuities. You sell income-based fixed index
Yeah,
annuities, such. But so we hear that question, and we automatically assume the worst. We bring the objection with us, and so we think to ourselves, oh, this guy is, drank the Ken Fisher Kool-Aid, and we become defensive and we start to defend the use of annuity, or we try and explain the use of annuities when we don't even know why they're asking the question.
Yeah.
So, for example, you know that in my portfolio, I recently swapped out two annuities in the
Mhm.
last year and a half because the interest rate environment was so good.
Mhm.
And so, you know, um, Neil and Ben in your office came to me and said, you ought to take a look at this annuity. You're out of surrender,
Mhm.
and these things are really earning nice interest rates. And I was thinking about that the other day, by the way. When you're getting 5.5% on an annuity, you know, it's actually more like 6.5%. You know why?
Mm.
Because on an annuity, I'm not paying the AUM fee.
That's right. Great point.
So,
That's a good one. I like that.
so, but that's a favorable rate. So I've swapped out two. Now, if I went to somebody and said, if I went to you and said, do you sell annuities? Because I have a favorable opinion of annuities,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, are there any new ones out there that I
Mm.
can capitalize on today that
Yep.
have better interest rates, that have better terms than what I had from, say, 5 or 6 years ago?
Great point.
Okay. But that's not what you think.
No.
You think to yourself, oh gosh, this
Here it
guy hates
comes. Yeah.
annuities. Here it comes. Now I'm going to have to defend.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by don't bring the objection with you.
Yeah.
So the first thing that you want to do is you want to get behind the question and find out, why are they asking? That's what I call advanced listening and questioning techniques,
Mhm.
because we don't know why they're asking.
Mhm.
And most people don't ask the
Mm.
real question up front.
Mm.
They and you know
Right, because do you sell annuities is not the real question.
it's not the real question.
Yeah.
The real question is, are there annuities out there that I could take advantage of?
That would protect my income.
Or it could, that would protect your income. Or it could be, um, are you going to try and sell me an annuity?
Right.
Are you a one trick pony?
Yes. Yes.
Whereas you're not.
And I think the advisors that get that question think that way.
They do.
Are you the one trick pony? Is all you do
Exactly.
is sell annuities? And now all of a sudden, you need to start to go on this long defensive explanation of how you're full service. And we look at all 5 key areas and yada, 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 yada. And that's the wrong road to go down.
It makes me think of, the question we'll oftentimes get from our spouse, which is, do we have any plans for Saturday? Well, I learned a long time ago that sometimes you have to find out why she's asking, because she probably has something in mind,
Yeah.
and it's very likely not something that I want to do.
Right.
She might want to go to some craft fair or some art fair or something like that. So I've learned to say, I know I have something going on Saturday, um, but I don't have my calendar in front of me. What makes you
Great
ask, honey?
strategy. Great strategy.
And if she says, "Well, there's this craft show," I says, you know what? I'm playing pickleball that day, or I promised Ethan that I was going to help him move some furniture. That sounds like something you ought to do with your best friend.
Yeah.
And I've just found that it's helped me along the way, whether it's in a selling environment or even in a personal environment. Let's find out what's driving the question, because the question really isn't, what are we doing on Saturday? The question is, will you go to this craft fair with me?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, just so that if she's ever watching this, that's not something that Kelly would do.
Right.
But needless to say, let's find out what's driving the question so we don't bring the objection, or we don't put ourselves in an awkward position. Okay. Now,
So the textbook technique would be what?
I appreciate you asking. That's a question we frequently get. That's a softening statement,
Mm.
followed by the Socratic question, but what made you ask me that right now? And of course, it's done in a very nurturing way. It's just like you did it when I said, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Well, that's because you're well trained.
Well,
Okay.
look at but look at the way that I did it versus you. That's a great question. Why do you ask? What you did is you said, that's a great question. We get that frequently.
Yes.
Key there, by the way, because we get that frequently makes them feel they're not alone in asking that question. And it does soften it.
Right. We think about this, and I know we're getting off track here, but we have this certain conditioning, okay? And I talk about it in our training where whenever we hear a question, first of all, not only do we feel the need to, not only do we bring the objection with us and imagine worst case scenario, but we feel like we need to answer that question immediately. And that stems from the fact that through the 12 years of elementary and secondary school we went to, and then if you go on to college or even grad school, we were forever being judged based upon the answers we gave to the questions. Think about it when you were a little kid, and you had a homework assignment. The teacher now asks you a question based on that homework assignment. And every kid in the room is raising his hand because he wants to be the one with the right answer.
Right.
And what happens when he gave the right answer? What would the teacher say?
Great job.
Great job.
Great job.
Accolades. Gold star for you today, Brian.
Yes.
And, it even happened before we went to school. It happened back when we were a little kid, and our parents were rewarding us with having the right answer. So there's a lot of conditioning that when we hear a question, we're supposed to answer. But if you remember the fact that the question the prospect asks is typically not the real question, if we answer their question, we are probably not answering the true question. And as a consequence, we don't ever find what the pain is that's driving that question. Now, we'll get back to third-party stories.
It's so interesting that you say that is I just had a meeting with a tax accountant as I've interviewed some more tax accountants. And I had asked a question. And he didn't answer that question at all. But yet I never said to him, you didn't answer my question. I just inside automatically felt, yeah, this isn't going to be the right guy for me.
Isn't that interesting? And
because that's what's happening when you answer the wrong question.
He doesn't get me.
He doesn't get me.
He doesn't understand me.
Right.
Yeah.
And why is it that the other person in the conversation, so me, right?
Yeah.
Why is it that the human brain in most cases don't go, you didn't answer my question.
Yeah.
But instead we just take whatever they say and you start to go, nope, not for me. And you start to build those up over the course of the meeting.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they didn't move forward with you.
The worst example, the worst mistake I've ever seen a client of mine make in this regard was a PR firm that I worked with years ago. And it was a really interesting scenario because I had just brought on this PR firm as a client. And the pain that the principal in this PR firm shared with me is he said, you know what, Larry, we win business that we didn't think we were going to get. And we don't win business that we thought we were going to get. So as a consequence, we never know what the right things are to replicate and what the things are to avoid. Well, of course, that's one of the problems with not having a process.
That's right. Yes.
But it was interesting. So I said to him, I said, can you give me an example of that? Okay. And he shared an example with me of, it was a nonprofit group that was based in Western PA. And it was a group that I had just joined. And as I would typically do whenever I would join an organization like this, I would try and get myself on a committee or into some type of a leadership role. And so they don't have a sales committee, but they do have a marketing committee. So I joined the marketing committee. Now, here's what's interesting. This firm that I was working with was the third largest firm in the city of Pittsburgh. But they were a big firm, a very successful firm. And one of the reasons that they were very proud of their stature as the third largest is that they were the largest homegrown firm in the city of Pittsburgh. The other large firms were branches or offshoots of a New York firm and a Chicago firm, right? So they're homegrown Pittsburgh, and they had about 75 people on their staff, which that's big for a PR firm. Oftentimes, a PR firm might only have like 5 people, maybe 1 or 2 principals and a staff, right? So he tells me that he, I said, so tell me about this. And he goes on to tell me about how they like to tout the fact that they have all of these marquee clients. These were big Pittsburgh iconic names, names like U.S. Steel,
Mm.
Pittsburgh National Bank or PNC
Yep.
Corp, Alcoa. Those were their clients.
Those big names.
Big names here in Pittsburgh. So what was interesting is I go to my first meeting of the marketing committee for this organization, okay? And old news is they're announcing the PR firm
Mm-hmm.
that they just hired. Now, unbeknownst to me, because I had just joined this committee, they were replacing their old PR firm. Now, as the new kid on the block, I'm curious, okay?
Mm.
And so I said, hey, I know this is, old history, but I am curious. When you made the decision and they chose this little 5-person firm, okay, who else did you interview for the PR work? And they gave me 4 other names, one of whom happened to be my new client. And I'm like, oh, wow.
Okay.
And I said, I'm curious, why didn't you choose the firm that was my client? And they said, they're too big for us.
Mm.
And I said, interesting. I would think that a large firm would be better than a small firm. They have more resources,
Yeah.
they have more personnel, maybe they've been around longer, they have a better network of contacts. Why is bigger not better in this case? Well, what you don't know, Larry, is that the firm we worked with before was the largest firm in the city of Pittsburgh. It was one of these New York offshoots.
And they
Okay?
got lost in the shuffle.
They got lost in the shuffle. They felt like they were being underserved. Now,
Yep.
the reality is they probably had a bad account manager, okay?
Right.
But the reality is they thought that they were a small fish in this large firm's big pond. And so, because they were so small, nobody cared about them. They were ignored.
Right.
So, I have this information. I said, thanks, guys. And we went on and we started to deal with new business and
Yeah.
all this stuff. So, my first meeting with my new client, I asked the principal, I said, by the way, I understand that you recently bid on the work with this nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
I said, have you heard yet who got it? He says, yeah, it wasn't us. And he kind of goes off on this little rant. He says, I can't believe they would choose this little 5-person firm
Mm-hmm.
instead of choosing us. We have so many more resources that we can bring. So much, we could do a much better job. And I said, can I ask you a question? Did they ever ask you how big you were?
Yeah.
And he goes, first question out of their mouth. I thought it was unusual because we don't get it typically that early in the conversation. I said, how did you respond?
Yeah.
Oh, I told them. 3rd largest in the city of Pittsburgh. We're
Yep.
the largest
Yep.
homegrown firm. I said, what else did you tell them? Oh, I told them, we have clients like U.S. Steel and PNC Bank and, Alcoa.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, that's interesting. He says, well, is that a bad thing?
Right.
I said, in this case, it was. He goes, how so? I said, the reason they were asking is they didn't think that bigger was better. In fact, they were trying to avoid the pain that they had experienced when they were working with your larger competitor.
And because he never found out what the question was behind the question.
Exactly.
He answered it in the way that he thought they would like to hear it.
Right.
And in fact, that's killed the deal.
He killed the sale in the first 30 seconds.
Right.
Which...
And they probably didn't come out after he said that and said, well, our concern is that you're going to be too big and we're going to get lost in the shuffle. They didn't follow up with that. They just, in their mind, just like I said at the beginning of the episode,
That's
they're
right.
going, okay,
Yeah.
probably not for us.
Probably not for us.
And
so
setting that aside.
now they're trying to dig themselves out of that hole,
Right.
if they even knew that they created a hole.
Yeah.
In this case, they never found out that they created the hole
Yeah.
until I told them. But yeah, it was over at that point.
So do you think the right technique is anytime a question is asked, try to find out the reason why it's being asked?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
So
And there's got to be different ways to do that. Otherwise, it's going to sound, that's a great question. Why do you ask? That's a great question.
You get
Yeah.
you get to use that particular softening statement and that Socratic question once in the
Okay,
course of
right,
the conversation.
yeah.
Now, it goes back to what I was saying, this conditioning. So one of the best ways for us to respond to that is with the softening statement. That's what I said earlier. It says, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a question that we oftentimes hear
Yeah.
from a lot of our clients.
Yep.
But they all ask it for a different reason.
Mm.
Tell me what makes you bring that up.
Yeah.
Now, here's what's happening. First of all, if we were to answer the question without doing the softening statement, followed by the what made you bring that up, we get in trouble in one of two ways. One is we answer what's not the real question.
Yeah, right.
Which now doesn't really serve our purposes because
yeah.
we don't answer the right question. And then the second thing is we lose the opportunity to uncover their pain.
Yes.
And as you know from prior podcasts, it's all about pain. I mean, and people don't ask the real question because they don't trust you yet,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they don't want to make themselves vulnerable. And so they ask you a smoke screen,
Yep.
okay? Because if they don't, they fear that, you know, you're going to give them the answer that they want to hear. I mean, in reality, if
Yeah.
we go back to this example with the PR
Yeah.
firm, the real question was, are you going to provide us with the level of service that we're hoping for?
Yeah, but in human conversation, there's always a general question, like that's presented first. Like, so how many clients do you guys have?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or how long have you been in business?
Mm-hmm.
How many employees do you have? Right?
Good examples.
The-
And what are they really asking? They're really asking the question of, do you work with people like me?
Right.
Do you have the experience to handle my scenario? And so this goes back now to why we want to oftentimes respond to their question with a third party story,
Mm-hmm.
with a softening statement that says, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a question we frequently hear from a lot of our clients. Now, when they hear that, the conditioning they hear is, you know, and I always say it's either the teacher's voice or it's mom's voice, who's giving them a small reward saying, you just asked a very good question. You just asked a question that a lot of people ask. It's another way of rewarding them. It's like getting rewarded without having the right answer. We haven't even given them an answer yet. So, but when we say, I appreciate that, that's a question we frequently get. That person's thinking to themselves, I just asked a good question. I'm pretty smart. It's almost like they get the same accolade that we're hoping for.
Yeah. And
And
one
then,
thing I've heard you do too is you go, that's a great question. A lot of our clients have asked that question.
Mhm.
And I think by saying a lot of our clients have asked that question, the assumption is, well, it sounds like we might be a lot like their clients.
Exactly. We're a good fit.
Yes, without
for what
saying
you
that.
do
Right,
here,
right.
because you've dealt with these questions and people that have the challenges that spawn those questions in the past.
And those people became clients.
Exactly.
Essentially. Yeah, that's strong.
Well, it's critical because if we don't do that, we will frequently answer the wrong question, or at the very least, we're going to lose the reason that they're asking. Now, you posed.
You said to me, I remember sitting down on Fridays with you, and you said to me, Brian, once you understand this stuff that's in the academy
Mm-hmm.
and you go through it, you are never going to look at any sales call the same again, even those people calling you and trying to sell you. And now when I get a cold call, right, from a young kid,
Yeah.
I find myself taking control of the call for the individual because I feel so bad for them. Or I just let them do their shtick. And the whole time, I'm just like, wow,
Yeah.
it's so bad they don't even know it.
Oh, I have become what I call a sales bigot now. In today's politically charged world, anytime you put bigot at the end, it doesn't sound good. But my point in this is, unless somebody is selling me the way I want to be sold, I don't want
Yeah.
to buy from them.
Right.
So oftentimes I have to take charge of the sales call and
Mm.
feed this guy the questions he should ask me so that he can get to the
Yeah.
questions that I want answered,
Right. Right.
But back to this story thing
Yes.
though.
Yes.
You know, anytime we want to explain something, if we can explain it in the form of a story, or if we can position the question that they're asking in the form of a story, it connects better.
Mm-hmm.
Because, before we had the written word, if you go back and you look at, I don't know when the written word came around, but, back in the days where tribes passed on their history
Mm-hmm.
from one generation to the next, it was all done by stories. It was all done orally. To be candid, we still do it today. I was talking to my son the other day, and he's a big fan of historical fiction, as I am. And who's the guy that? There's somebody that's Eric Larson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just picked up his latest book, and I'm on a little bit of a Civil War jag right now. And I thought to myself, how much more entertaining is it to read a novel that's based in fact, where the characters are real characters, but we're learning history more in the form of a story
Mm.
as opposed to just a series of facts.
Yes.
When you and I went to history
Total
class,
boredom. Total
total
boredom.
boredom, and
Yes.
we had to learn, when did the Civil War start? What were the reasons behind the Civil War? I was like, shoot me now.
Mm.
It was boring.
Yes.
But like, I was watching the American Revolution documentary series by Ken Burns. That's
Yeah.
his latest, and I think back to when he um, did the Civil War documentary with, way back when. It was his first one. It was the one that really put him on the map. And he had these individuals. There was a guy named Shelby Foote, and Shelby Foote would tell these stories about these Confederate generals
Mm.
and what was going through the mind of, Robert E. Lee when he's meeting with um, General Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. And it's like, wow. And all of a sudden, I could relate to, being Robert E. Lee, who's now this vanquished general, and how
Mm-hmm.
bad he had to feel, and how appreciative he was that General Grant gave him favorable terms, allowed his officers to go home with their sidearms, allowed their soldiers to go home with their horses so they used the horses to plow the field. And that was the thing I thought that, wow, that brought history to life.
Yes.
But it was in the context of a story.
Right.
Now let's take that back to, what you guys do.
Yep.
If all you're going to do is deliver the features and benefits that come from them working with you, and showing a sample retirement plan that it has their numbers in it, but that those facts, that data doesn't resonate with the prospect as much as if you can put a story around it. Now, as you do
So,
at
for
the end of
example,
your
you know, someone
diagnosis
says,
step,
go ahead, go ahead.
well, at the end of your diagnosis step, you always do what I call the master third party story,
Yes.
where you say, your situation is an awful lot like Joe and
Debbie's situation.
Debbie's
Yes.
situation. Joe was a guy a lot like you. He'd worked for the same company
Yes.
for so many years.
Yes.
He'd saved something comparable in terms. Now, Debbie, your story is a lot like this woman's
Yes.
story. And all of a sudden they're saying, oh, that does sound just like us. And so when you're talking about what you did for that couple, even though you did it for somebody else, they can relate to the characters in the story
Yes.
because the characters sound just like them.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's so much better than asking them Uh, so do you think that this is the type of, investing you want to do? Is this what you were looking for today? You could still ask those questions,
Yeah,
but if you ask those prior to the story, uh, there's nothing behind it.
yeah. And so all of a sudden now you're giving them the same information, but you're couching it in
Yep.
terms of a third party story. This
You're
person,
giving the features and benefits of the planning, the annuities, how things are structured, all in the story without giving the facts of the features and benefits. Well, let me tell you what this product
right,
does. It guarantees and protects your income. If the market goes up, you make a little bit of money, but if the market goes down, you don't lose any money. But maybe you've said it like, well, the one nice thing that Tom really liked about this account was that he was going to have a paycheck every single month,
right,
and that gave Mary a lot of peace of mind knowing that that
exactly.
money was always going to be there. But he also liked the fact that if the markets went up, he made a little bit of money, but if it went down, he didn't lose anything.
And
And,
then, and let's suppose in the situation that Debbie now says, but what about this surrender charge?
yeah,
So the perfect way to soften that before you get into it is says, you know what's interesting? Mary had the exact
exact
same
thing.
question. And so what does
Right?
Debbie feel like?
Yes.
Debbie feels like, oh, well, I'm not the only one. That's not a
You
stupid
reward her
question.
by saying, that's it. Justine, Mary had the saying, "Yeah, okay, I get it."
But even so, I would probably go a step farther
Okay.
before I answer the question. I said, "So what's your concern when asking that?"
Uh,
And she says, "Well, what if we need that money?"
yes.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. So this particular company allows you to take 10% of the annuity value in any given year.
Hmm.
Okay, but keep in mind we often have money over here in the liquid bucket
Yes.
so that you don't have to worry about that
Yeah.
anyway. The money that you're likely to spend in the course of the coming year is not coming out of either the pension bucket nor the long-term growth with risk bucket. It's coming out of the liquid bucket.
So now you're blending a little bit, right?
Yes.
You're blending the story with some harder facts there, right?
Yes.
That are more directed towards the product itself, but it's connecting to the story.
And then you might say to her, is there an expenditure that you have coming up on the
Hmm.
horizon that we need to incorporate into your plan? And she
Hmm.
said, well, it looks like my daughter might be getting married next year.
Ah, and
See,
there it is.
there it is.
There it
So
is. Right.
that's good to know. So we
Hmm.
need to carve out that money before we put it into an annuity so that it's available to you. Now, but what happens if all of a sudden we need more money? Well, I'm glad you bring that up. That's why we have an annual review every year. And see,
Hmm.
now you're selling yourself,
Hmm.
but you're selling it in the context of their story.
Yes.
It's their life, and it looks so much more tailored than if you're doing some canned presentation because what you're showing them is this is how we're going to take care of you. And this is the service that we're going to provide you on an annual basis. And don't worry, it's not as if this plan that we are recommending to you is etched in granite here. I
Yeah.
said, it's going to change over the course of your lifetime. That's why you need an advisor for the long term, not just a financial, or not just a retirement plan that's one and done.
And that
Okay.
was the reason why Bob and Mary moved forward with us,
Yeah.
was because they had the protection, they had the growth. It made Mary feel a lot better. Bob was happy because he still got to play in the market,
Yeah.
right? But he didn't have to worry about losing everything in the market.
Yeah.
And so this type of planning worked really well for them, and it made them feel really comfortable, gave them a lot of confidence, a lot of clarity. How do you feel about this type of planning? Do you think this is the type of planning you're looking for? And boom, now you just moved them.
See, exactly. That's exactly right, Brian. And the fact that somebody else felt comfortable with this planning,
It's the herd mentality,
it's
right?
the herd
The
mentality.
Joneses.
You know,
Yeah.
if we go back and we look at Cialdini's
Yeah.
6 or 7 principles of persuasion, social proof
Mm.
is one of those. And, you know,
So
but
that's really what you're doing in the stories. It's social. It's a whole. It's all built around social proof. That.
It is.
Yes.
It is, because what you're saying to them is your situation is very similar to everybody else's
Yes.
situation. This worked for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's likely to work for you. I mean, and the easiest example of social proof, and Amazon's the master of all these principles of persuasion.
Mm.
When you go on Amazon and you're thinking about buying a book or you're thinking about buying software, um, do you ever look at the reviews?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if a particular book or software has 4.5 stars, do you go in and look at some of those
I do.
5-star reviews?
I do.
You also probably look at some of the 1-star reviews,
I
don't
do.
you?
Yes.
Because you
Yes.
want to find out, is this person that likes that rated this a 1-star? Is he like me? Oh no,
Yeah.
he's not like me. I can relate to okay, this is going to work for me. That's social proof. If
Mm.
it worked for these people,
Yeah.
and on average, if they have 4.5 stars, and the reality is the people that rate a particular product or service are typically the people that love it or the people that hate it.
Yes.
Okay, so you're trying to find, okay,
Where's the middle?
what's the middle?
Yeah.
And if you're looking at something, I mean, Amazon's, they're geniuses because they put everything online, so now you don't have a salesperson in the mix, but they do.
That's right.
The salespeople are the reviewers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then they reward them as being a top 10.
Oh, wow, that's a really great way to look at it. That the actual reviewers are the salespeople
They are. So,
because they're giving the social proof.
But that social proof makes that person feel comfortable pulling the trigger.
So if you were to
that
rank social proof in the process,
Mm-hmm.
that would probably be one of the top 10 techniques in the academy that make the client builder process what it is.
I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, we leverage every one of them.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, social proof.
Well, think about it, because the story, you're going to have Socratic question, you're going to have softening statement, you're going to have story. So I can see where you're going at all of them.
So social proof is working in those scenarios.
Yes.
Another principle that we leverage is commitment and consistency. It's part of one of the reasons why we set advance agreements at the beginning and end of every appointment.
Yes.
Because we're leveraging that commitment. If the person has told us that they want to move forward, now they have a tendency to be consistent with that decision.
Yes.
So the more small decisions they make throughout the sales process, the more likely we are to get a client in the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's commitment and consistency. We leverage the scarcity principle, which is a big one, by positioning the no up front.
Yes.
We use all this stuff.
Right.
Yes. We use the authority figure.
Yes.
Or the authority principle, by virtue of the fact that, we want you to look good when you have an appointment. I want you to wear a jacket.
Yes.
Okay. Now you can take that jacket off if the guy shows up in his overalls.
Of course.
Because you want to connect with that individual. But for the most part, you want to look as good or one step better than the person you meet. So we leverage all that stuff.
When I was learning the process, you kind of shared this with me. You said, Brian, it's eventually going to get to a point where you're a painter and you have all these different types of brushes. Yep. And you've got this blank canvas.
Yep.
And at first, you're going to try to use all the brushes.
Mm-hmm.
But then as you get better, you're going to know what type of picture you're trying to paint, and you're going to use the appropriate brush at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what starts to happen as you get more repetition
Yep.
in this. My fear for those advisors that are watching this, that have been running their process for a period of time, is that if something gets a little clunky in the beginning because it's new, they tend to revert back to old habits.
They do.
And that's one that needs to be fought, because the client builder process, I dramatically changed our company. I mean, look at what we've been able to do. One, I went from $15 million a year in annuity business to $30 million a year very quickly using the client builder process. But not only that, where the real proof came was bringing in brand new people to the industry.
Yeah.
People that had never even had their license.
Yeah.
And now watching these individuals write $50 million, $70 million, $100 million in 1 year.
I know.
And know that the entire sales team, the entire advisory team can coach each other, because we have a common language that we can speak.
That's right.
And if you're managing your advisors, you as the sales manager actually now have a common language to be able to coach the advisors with and say, you never positioned a no here, or they asked you a question and you dove right into answering it without understanding what the question really was. And so the effectiveness of the client builder process is so powerful that it just allows you to not only get better for yourself, and if that's all you want to do is just be the single advisor office, go for it.
Yeah.
But if you want to scale, you're not going to be able to scale without a sales
Right.
process. It's impossible to do.
Yeah. You've pointed out so many good points, and that is that we oftentimes have an easier time converting the brand new sales
Yes.
person to this process because they don't have to undo their old habits.
Yeah.
And you had a term for it based on your football background when you played in college. You talked about watching game films.
Yes.
And so we would sit down and we would listen to a sales call that you were on together, okay? And we would stop the film or we would stop the tape at different points. Say, okay, wait a minute. Why did you do that when your route said that you were to go up here and there, but you somehow or another in the middle of the call decided you were going to pull an audible?
Yeah.
And that audible was oftentimes based on, your past experience.
Yes. Right.
Didn't work very well.
Right.
But
But
it
it was
was
comfortable.
comfortable.
It was comfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And then with the new guy, Michael, that we had brought on, I remember his first couple of appointments. I'm listening to one, and this woman comes in and she says, I don't know if I have enough money to retire. I'm really scared that I'm going to run out of money. Just the other day, my cat got sick and I had to take the cat to the vet, and the bill was $5,000, and I just don't know where to put my money, and I don't really like my advisor. And Michael's first thing out of his mouth is, "What kind of cat do you have?" and she just loaded on him every possible pain point that you could get, and he locks onto, "What kind of cat do you have?" Now, but if you think about it, when I was trained early on in my career, it was always find common ground with folks.
Yeah, that's what he was doing.
That's what he was trying to do.
He
but
was trying
wrong
to build
strategy.
rapport.
Yes.
When what he should have realized is they're presenting what we call a common complaint.
Yes.
And what he should do is latch onto one of those common complaints and drill down.
Yeah.
And she would have given him, well, two things would have happened. I mean, it would have focused on what you can fix.
Yeah.
Instead of, because he's not going to be able to do anything
with the cat.
And it would have helped her create the urgency
Yeah.
that she needs in her mind to say, I got to do something about it now.
Yes.
And it's funny. That's a common thing that we have a tendency to do. We have a tendency to fall back on that whole rapport building thing.
Yeah.
And as you and I know, many people don't want that rapport building.
No, they don't.
They want rapport building, but making chit chat around cats isn't going to create the rapport with any impact that talking about the common concerns that they wrestle with that you can solve.
Yes.
And the key is don't solve it right away. The key is drill down, get them talking about it. And that's the last thing I want to say before we break today is if we go back to that painting analogy, over time you learn about what brushes to use. In time, when we really get good, we come to realize that the person that needs to be telling the story is the prospect themselves. And we need to learn how to hand them the brush.
Powerful.
And let them paint the picture for us. We'll talk about that.
Well, I couldn't end the segment any better than that, but another great episode on the Client Builder Playbook here. When we come back on another episode, we're going to be talking about the power of the follow-up and why the fortune is really in the follow-up, which I think we'll all do really, really poorly, but we're going to learn from the master Larry Lewis himself on how to follow up and make more money by consistently doing it. We'll see you on the next episode of Client Builder Playbook.